found myself at my pregnant daughter's house, and I froze when I saw her unconscious on the floor while my son-in-law was celebrating his lover's birthday on a yacht. I only sent a few words to my son-in-law. His face went white as a sheet. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I knelt on the floor, a rag in my hand, trying to clean an oil stain from the old linoleum. A pile of laundry sat on a chair, and the strong smell of detergent from a plastic bucket filled the small room. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. I looked at the screen and saw a familiar name, Sarah, my daughter. I quickly wiped my hands on my apron, my heart pounding as I pressed the answer button. Sarah's weak voice came through as if she was fighting for every breath. "Mom, my stomach hurts. I don't feel well." Her words pierced my chest like a knife. I couldn't ask anything else before I heard her take a shaky breath, and then silence. The call cut. I called back immediately, but it just rang and rang. My heart seized. A cold chill ran down my spine. "Sarah!" I screamed into the empty house, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Did she call a doctor? Was anyone with her? But there was no time to think. I grabbed the old coat hanging from a chair and snatched my worn purse on the way out. My feet flew towards the door. I didn't even bother to lock it. Outside, the sun was brutal. The Chicago heat made me sweat the second I stepped onto the street. I flagged down a cab and with a trembling voice gave the address. "Number 34 Pine Street, please hurry." The driver saw the look on my face and stepped on the gas. I tried to calm myself in the back seat, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip my purse to keep from dropping my phone. I sent a message to Ryan, my son-in-law. "Sarah is sick. Where are you?" There was no answer. I called him again and again. His phone went straight to voicemail. Out of service. I cursed under my breath, trying to keep my fear from turning into pure rage. "Ryan, you bastard! Where are you when my daughter needs you?" I stared out the window. Familiar streets passed by in a blur. The food stand where Sarah and I used to sit, where she'd order tacos with a huge smile. The flower shop on the corner, where she'd stop to look at the red carnations. Seeing it all now just twisted the knife deeper, reminding me that my daughter was in danger. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of Sarah's house. The front door was ajar, as if someone had left in a panic. I pushed it open, shouting, "Sarah, honey!" My voice echoed in the silent house. No one answered. I walked in, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The living room was dark, a single lamp casting a yellow glow on pieces of broken glass scattered across the floor. A red stain juice or wine I didn't know spread from the coffee table to the sofa. An armchair was knocked over, thrown to the side, and there in a corner was Sarah's phone lying on the floor, the screen still lit, as if it was trying to tell me something. I ran towards the far side of the room. My daughter was there, lying on her side, motionless, one hand on her pregnant belly. Her face was pale, her eyes closed. I knelt beside her and shook her, calling her name over and over. "Sarah, wake up, Mom's here." But she didn't react. With a trembling hand, I touched her forehead. It was covered in a cold sweat. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I knew I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I pulled out my cell phone, dialed 911, and with a hoarse voice, I told the operator, "Number 34 Pine Street. My daughter is unconscious. She's pregnant. Please come now." The minutes waiting for the ambulance felt like an eternity. I sat beside Sarah, stroking her hair and whispering, "Honey, just hang on. Mom is right here with you." I didn't know if she could hear me, but I had to keep talking, had to do something to keep from going insane. In the distance, I heard the wail of a siren, a ray of hope. I ran to open the door, screaming, "In here, hurry!" The medical team rushed in with a stretcher and an oxygen tank. They checked Sarah immediately, took her blood pressure, listened for the baby's heartbeat. One of them, in a serious, urgent voice, said to his partner, "Her water broke. She's critical." His words hit me like a hammer. I wanted to ask if my daughter would be okay, but they had already lifted her onto the stretcher and were running for the ambulance. I scrambled in after them, refusing to let go of my daughter's hand. The doors slammed shut. The siren blared, tearing through the air. Inside the ambulance, with Sarah's hand in mine, the whole world shrank to that tiny space. A young nurse, her hair in a ponytail, watched my daughter's heart rate on a monitor, her expression tense. "The baby's heart is still beating, but it's weak," she said to her partner, her voice serious and fast. The other medic, a tall man in gloves, carefully inserted an IV needle into her arm. I watched that needle pierce Sarah's fragile skin, and my own heart felt like it was being torn apart. She didn't move. Her face was ashen, her lips dry. I wanted to scream to ask why this was happening to my daughter, but all I could do was squeeze her hand tighter and whisper, "Hang on, Sarah, Mom is here." The nurse spoke into the radio, her voice nervous. "Obstetric emergency, premature membrane rupture, severe hemorrhaging. Prep the OR now." I listened without understanding, like they were speaking another language. Hemorrhaging rupture. My daughter was 8 months pregnant. She was supposed to be at home on the couch laughing with me about what to name my grandson, and now she was fighting for her life while I could only watch as strangers tried to save her. The ambulance braked suddenly at the hospital entrance. The doors flew open and the team ran, pushing the stretcher. I was right behind them, tripping over my own feet. I barely heard a doctor shout, "Emergency C-section!" The door to the emergency room appeared in front of me, but a nurse stopped me, putting a hand on my shoulder and saying softly but firmly, "Wait out here. We'll do everything we can." I wanted to push past her to go in with my daughter, but my legs wouldn't respond. The door swung shut, and I was left alone in the ice-cold hallway. I collapsed into a chair, burying my face in my hands. The sound of hurried footsteps, the voices of nurses, the beeping of machines behind the door. Each sound was a knife in my chest. I don't know how much time passed. I just remember staring at that door, praying for it to open and for someone to tell me Sarah was fine. But a deep, dark fear was growing inside me, the fear that the door would open and bring the worst news imaginable. After an hour, a doctor came out. He had a serious face, his tired eyes behind his glasses. He looked at me and said in a deep voice, "Are you Sarah's mother?" I just nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. "We delivered the baby. It's a boy. He's premature in an incubator on assisted breathing. The mother had a major hemorrhage. She's in a coma and has been transferred to intensive care." His words hit me like a tidal wave. A boy. My grandson. Premature. Coma. I wanted to ask more, to know if my daughter was going to survive, but my throat closed up and all I could do was cry. I got up stumbling and followed a nurse who led me to the neonatal intensive care unit. Through the thick glass, I saw the baby. He was so tiny, lying in an incubator, his little body trembling, so weak, covered in tubes. His tiny hands were clenched into fists, as if trying to hold on to life. I pressed my hand against the glass, and the cold seeped into my fingertips. "My boy," I whispered. "Hold on, little one." But the tears wouldn't stop falling, blurring his image. I thought of Sarah, of all the times she caressed her belly and smiled whenever she felt him kick. Now the baby was here all alone, and his mother was lying somewhere else between life and death. I ran back to the intensive care unit. Sarah was there motionless, her pale face washed out under the cold white light. The machines around her beeped with a constant mechanical, soulless rhythm. I pulled a chair close, sat beside her, and took her hand. It was cold, and her thin fingers felt so fragile it broke my heart. "Sarah," I whispered, "you have to wake up. You have to see your son." But she didn't respond. Only the machines answered for her. I went back and forth endlessly between the two rooms. From the NICU, where my grandson was barely breathing, to the ICU, where my daughter was fighting for her life. Each step felt like it was weighed down with lead, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't leave my daughter or my grandson alone. Every few minutes, I'd pull out my phone and call Ryan again. "Sarah is in critical condition. Get to the hospital now." I texted with a shaking hand, but he didn't answer. I called his office and only got his secretary's cold voice. "Mr. Johnson is unavailable." I wanted to scream, to demand to know where he was while his wife, my daughter, was going through this. But I held it in because I knew anger was useless right now. Desperate, I returned to Sarah's side. I took her hand and murmured, "Honey, hang on. I can't lose you." A nurse passed by, stopped, and looked at me with compassion. "You need to sign the authorization for a broader medical intervention," she told me in a low voice, handing me some papers. I took out my ID and signed, though my hand was shaking so much that the signature came out crooked. I didn't even know what I was signing. I just knew I had to do whatever it took to save her. Sitting next to Sarah's bed, I heard familiar footsteps. I looked up and saw Michael, an old friend from my Army days, now a security guard at the hospital. He recognized me immediately and rushed over, his brown eyes full of concern. "Elena, what happened? I heard they brought her in as an emergency." I told him what little I knew, my voice hoarse. Michael didn't say much. He just gave me a pat on the shoulder and went to buy me a bottle of water and a sandwich. "You have to stay strong," he told me sincerely. I nodded, though I couldn't swallow a thing. The bottle of water was cold in my hand, as cold as my heart at that moment. I sank into a chair in the hallway and looked at the clock. It was already midnight. The hospital hallway was silent. All you could hear was the hum of the air conditioning, and from time to time a voice over the intercom. In the distance I heard some nurses talking about a party at the marina, about lit-up yachts and happy music. It was like hearing about another World War without pain or fear. But I was stuck here under the yellow hospital lights, waiting for a miracle. I jolted awake in the old plastic chair in the hospital hallway. My legs ached after hours of running between the intensive care unit and the neonatology room. My back was on fire, as if every bone was protesting from exhaustion. The yellow light from the ceiling cast a dim glow, making the hallway seem even colder. Around me there was only the sound of a few doctors' tired footsteps and the metallic voice from the speakers paging someone. I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe deeply, but the weight on my chest wouldn't go away. Sarah was still unconscious, my grandson was hooked up to a machine, and Ryan, my son-in-law, the one who should have been here, was gone. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying not to scream in the middle of the empty hall. Next to me, 3 young women were laughing on a bench. They were probably in their early 20s, wearing t-shirts and jeans, their hair up in ponytails. One of them exclaimed excitedly, "Oh my God, that's so romantic! He proposed on a yacht!" I glanced over, not meaning to pry, but the light from her cell phone caught my eye. They were watching a video with loud music and laughter in the background. I saw bright lights, champagne glasses being raised, and a man in a white suit kneeling down holding a glittering box. The camera zoomed in, and his face became clear. I felt my heart stop. It was Ryan. I blinked, thinking I was mistaken, but no. He was smiling radiantly, putting a ring on the finger of a woman in a red bikini, her long hair blowing in the wind. Behind them, fireworks exploded and people cheered. I put my hand to my chest, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. Ryan, my son-in-law. The man I had welcomed into my family like a son, was proposing to another woman, while my daughter was in a coma and my grandson was fighting to breathe. I wanted to scream to break something, but I was frozen in place. The girl with the cell phone noticed me staring and looked up a little uncomfortable. Do you want to see?" she asked shyly. I nodded, unable to speak. I just whispered, "Can you play it for me again?" She replayed the video, and this time I saw it all more clearly. Ryan, with that same smile he always had when he was boasting about his work, kissing that woman's hand. She laughed happily, her eyes shining under the yacht's lights. The applause, the music. Every sound was like a blade twisting inside me. I clutched my chest. I couldn't breathe. Just then my cell phone vibrated. The message I had sent to Ryan was still unanswered. I called him, but his phone was still off. A nurse walked by, saw how pale I was, and stopped. "Are you okay? Do you want some water?" I forced a smile. I just shook my head. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice breaking. She watched me for a few more seconds and then continued on her way, leaving me alone with the storm raging inside me. I got up on trembling legs and went out to the hospital courtyard. The night air was cold, but it did nothing to soothe the pain that was tearing me apart. I took a deep breath, fighting not to collapse right there. The image of Ryan on the yacht kept replaying in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. He was laughing, enjoying a world of luxury while my daughter lay motionless, and my grandson was so fragile I was afraid to even touch him. I sat back down in the hospital hallway chair, my hands trembling, my heart as heavy as a stone. The intercom crackled somewhere calling for a doctor, but I couldn't process anything. I wanted to get up to do something to shake off this feeling of drowning, but my body felt glued to that cold plastic chair. Then, like a flash in the darkness, I remembered. Sarah's cell phone. When I found it lying on the floor, I had picked it up and shoved it in my purse in the middle of the panic. At that moment, I was only thinking about saving her, but now I had a feeling that phone held all the answers. I opened my purse, fumbling through loose papers and a handful of keys. There was Sarah's phone. The screen was cracked in a corner, but when I pressed the power button, it lit up. I let out a sigh of relief, but my heart twisted when I opened her messages. The first one I saw hit me like a punch to the gut. "Your husband is mine." Just 4 words, but they cut straight to the heart. The message had arrived seconds before Sarah collapsed. It came with a photo. I opened it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Ryan in a white shirt hugging a woman in a red bikini. The same one from the proposal video. They were on a couch, the lights shining on her beaming face. Ryan was smiling, his arm wrapped around her waist as if they were the only 2 people in the world. I squeezed the phone so hard my nails dug into my palm. "You bastard!" I muttered, my voice cracking with rage. This wasn't just a betrayal. This is what had pushed my daughter to the brink of death. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I knew I had to stay calm. I needed to know exactly what had happened. With my hands still trembling, I opened the security camera app on Sarah's phone. She had installed it to keep an eye on the house when she was away, and I had helped her set it up. I entered the passcode and rewound the video to the moment the message arrived. The screen lit up, and I held my breath as I saw Sarah. She was on the couch, one hand on her belly, the other holding her phone. Her face was pale, her eyes wide as if she had just seen a ghost. I watched her make a call, then another, but no one answered. "Ryan, where are you?" she whispered, her voice broken. Then she stood up suddenly, walking quickly, but she stumbled on the armchair behind her. There was a dull thud. The glass on the table fell to the floor and shattered. Sarah fell hard, clutching her belly, her mouth open as if she wanted to scream but couldn't. She lay there motionless, and then the video feed went dark. I felt my heart stop. I rewound it again, watching it over and over, as if by just watching, I could somehow change what had happened. But the truth was right there, cruel and undeniable. That message, that photo had sent my daughter into a panic. That shock had made her fall, pushing her and my grandson to the very edge between life and death. I clutched my chest, tears streaming down my face, but I bit my lip to keep from sobbing out loud. Not now. I had to be strong. I saved the video to my memory card and carefully tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I took a screenshot of the message and the photo of Ryan with his lover. Every action felt like a hammer blow to my chest, but I knew this was evidence, the key to understanding what happened and making sure Ryan didn't get away with it. I stayed in the chair in the hallway, still holding Sarah's phone, as if it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Just then my phone vibrated. It was Eugene, an old friend from my army days. He was calling to see how I was, his deep, warm voice, just as I remembered it. "Elena, I heard about Sarah. Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I'm not okay, Eugene, but I need to see you. Can we meet tomorrow?" He agreed immediately, no questions asked. I hung up, feeling a slight sense of relief, knowing I wasn't completely alone. But my mind was still spinning. I started putting the pieces together. Ryan had abandoned Sarah in the final days of her pregnancy, right when she needed him most. He had lied to her about a business trip to Chicago, but he was actually throwing a lavish birthday party for his lover. And that message, "Your husband is mine," was the final blow that pushed my daughter over the edge. I looked down the hallway where the faint yellow light cast long shadows on the cold white walls. The hospital intercom crackled again, calling another emergency. I held the phone in my hand, feeling like I was holding a bomb that was about to go off. This was the truth, and I knew it would change everything. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, I took advantage of the nurse's shift change to leave the icy hallway. I approached Sarah's bed. I looked at her still motionless, her face pale under the white light. I took her hand and whispered, "Mom will be back soon, Sarah. You and the baby be strong." Then I turned to Dr. Morales, who had been taking care of my daughter with such dedication since the previous night. "Please watch over my daughter and my grandson," I said, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. He nodded, his eyes full of empathy. "Don't worry, I'll be here." I gave him a small nod back, feeling like I was leaving a piece of my heart in that intensive care room. I took a taxi to Sarah's house. My hands were trembling as I put the spare key in the lock. When I opened the door, the smell of disinfectant from the night before still lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the moment I found my daughter lying on the floor. The house was now too quiet, almost suffocating. The furniture was still in disarray. A chair toppled on its side, pieces of broken glass on the floor, a stain of red juice spread out like blood. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to be strong. I wasn't here just to clean up. I was here to find answers, to follow the trail of Ryan, the man who had driven my daughter to the brink of death. I started in the living room, picking up the pieces of glass, straightening the furniture, but my eyes were scanning every corner. I knew Ryan. He always left a trail, like an arrogant man who believes he'll never be caught. I went into Sarah's room, where she once dreamed of having a happy family. On the small desk, I saw an envelope sticking out from under some papers. I knelt down, pulled it out, and felt my heart pound as I opened it. Inside were several documents, plane tickets from our city to Chicago business class in Ryan's name, an invoice from a 5-star hotel in Chicago paid for by Sarah Johnson, my daughter, and a receipt that left me frozen. A Rolex watch valued at nearly $20,000, purchased just 3 days earlier, also in my daughter's name. I laid everything out on the bed, my hands shaking as I looked at the figures. Ryan had been using Sarah's money, which she had saved from her hard work as a graphic designer, to fund his lavish double life. I photographed each document with my cell phone, taking extreme care, as if missing a single detail meant losing the chance for justice. I opened the nightstand drawer, hoping to find more evidence. I found several receipts for cash withdrawals for amounts so large they took my breath away. They had all been withdrawn the very day Sarah was hospitalized. I collapsed onto the bed, holding my head in my hands, feeling like the world was caving in. "Ryan," I murmured, "what did you do to my daughter?" I got up and kept searching like an old soldier, tracking an enemy. In the kitchen on the table, I saw a shopping bag from a luxury fashion store. I opened it. Inside was an empty box with a receipt in the name of Ryan Johnson, a designer dress over $5,000. It certainly wasn't for Sarah. I imagined him giving it to the woman in the red bikini, and a fire of rage lit up inside me. I put everything in a brown folder, zipping it shut carefully, as if to make sure the evidence couldn't escape. Just then my phone vibrated. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my heart racing, but I didn't answer. It rang several more times, then stopped. I knew he was trying to reach me, but I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear his lies. I needed time to sort through everything, to turn this evidence into weapons. I left the house, sealing the door with old military-grade tape and signing my name across it. If Ryan came back, he wouldn't be able to get anything without me knowing. On my way out, I passed by Mrs. Gable's house, Sarah's neighbor. She, an older woman with gray hair, was on her porch watering some plants. When she saw me, she looked up concerned. "Elena, how is Sarah?" I told her briefly, my voice hoarse. Mrs. Gable nodded and murmured, "I've seen Ryan leaving with a suitcase a couple of times lately. I thought he was just going on trips, but this last time he left in such a hurry and didn't come back." Her words fit like another piece of the puzzle. I nodded and thanked her, but inside the rage burned even hotter. Not only had he abandoned Sarah, he had also taken his son. Who knows where, as if he had the right to act in secret. I took a taxi home to the little house on the outskirts of the city where I've lived for over 30 years. I powered up my old military-issue laptop, the one I used to manage files back in the service. The screen took a long time to boot up, but I didn't care. I transferred all the photos from my phone to the computer. I organized each receipt, each check into a separate folder. Every time I looked at them, I saw the image of Sarah lying on the floor, her hand on her belly, and my tiny grandson in that incubator. I gritted my teeth to keep from crying. "You're not getting away with this, Ryan," I murmured, as if he could hear me. That afternoon, the intense sun streamed through the window, forcing me to squint as I left the hospital. I stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath to calm myself. The brown folder felt heavy in my hand, as if it contained all my fury and determination. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Ryan had gone too far, and I had to act. I took out my phone and dialed Eugene Ortega's number, an old Army friend, now a senior officer at the Military Credit Union. "Eugene, I need to see you now," I said, my voice firm, even though my heart was pounding. He answered right away, his voice deep and warm. "Elena, come to my office. I'll be here all day." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, and took a taxi straight to the bank. Eugene's office was on the third floor, small but tidy, with an old photo hanging on the wall, us in our uniforms smiling alongside our comrades. Eugene stood up to shake my hand, his eyes full of concern when he saw my face. "Sit down, Elena. What's so serious?" I placed the folder on his desk, unzipped it, and laid out the invoices, plane tickets, and receipts one by one. "Ryan," I said, my voice breaking, "has been using Sarah's money to live a double life while she's lying in a coma." Eugene put on his glasses, examined each paper, and his brow furrowed. He shook his head, his voice grim. "He used the girl's account like it was his own personal wallet. This isn't just a betrayal, Elena. This is theft." I took out the financial power of attorney that Sarah had signed for me a few years ago when I had to go on a long mission at the border. "Is this still valid?" I asked. Eugene reviewed it and nodded. "It's still valid. With this, you have total control over Sarah's accounts." I let out a sigh as if I had just found a glimmer of hope. "Please, Eugene," I said, almost begging. "Block all of my daughter's accounts. Don't let him take another single dollar." Eugene agreed without hesitation. He sat down at his computer and quickly typed a series of commands. "Done," he said after a few minutes. "All of Sarah's accounts are frozen. All linked cards have been canceled. I also put an alert on them. If anyone tries to withdraw money, you'll get an immediate notification." I took his hand, thanking him with a look, but inside I knew the fight was just beginning. As I left his office, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it. My heart pounded, but I didn't answer. His voice came through in a furious voicemail. "What the hell did you do to the account? Where's the money?" I hung up. I didn't want to hear any more, but he didn't stop. Messages came one after another like a downpour. "You don't think you can just do whatever you want? Open the account now. I have an urgent payment to make." I read each line, feeling my blood boil. How dare he make demands after everything he had done to my daughter? Suddenly his tone changed. He started begging. "Your daughter needs me. Elena, think about Sarah." I almost let out a bitter laugh. Think about Sarah. What was he thinking about when he was hugging his lover on that yacht, when he let my daughter collapse from the shock? I didn't reply. I just saved every message and every audio file, accumulating more evidence. That afternoon, Ryan called more than 30 times. Sometimes I could hear music in the background. Other times he lowered his voice to almost a whisper. "Please, Elena, just a little. I'll pay you back." I let the phone ring. I didn't answer. Each call was a reminder of his betrayal, but also a confirmation that I was doing the right thing. When I got home, I turned on my old laptop. I logged into Sarah's bank account with the access Eugene had given me. A notification popped up. Ryan had tried to use the card in Chicago, but it was declined. I let out a sharp breath, as if I had just landed a blow. He had been living off my daughter's money, but now that well had run dry. I printed out the bank statements for the last 3 months. Every transaction was a stab to the heart, a reminder of Ryan's cruelty. I put them in the brown folder and locked it in the safe under my bed. I closed the safe as if locking away a part of my rage. Outside it was already night. The sound of the wind whistled through the trees, a faint comfort. But inside me the tension was still coiled tight, like before a battle I could not afford to lose. The next morning I woke up with burning eyes and a heavy head after a nearly sleepless night. The dawn light seeped through a crack in the curtains, but it brought no warmth. I put on a simple blouse, took the thick brown folder that had become an inseparable part of me, and walked out the door. Today, I was going to meet Arthur Ruiz, the lawyer Eugene had recommended. Inside me was a mix of hope and nerves, like a soldier preparing to go to war, knowing she can't lose, but fearing what awaits. Arthur's office was on a quiet corner in an old but clean building. When I walked in, I saw the walls lined with diplomas and photos of Arthur in major trials, standing tall in a black suit, his gaze firm. He greeted me with a confident handshake, his voice deep and warm. "Elena, please sit down. Eugene told me a little. What do you have for me?" I placed the folder on the table, unzipped it, and took out every paper, every photo I had so carefully gathered. "This is everything I have," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Ryan took my daughter's money and left her alone at her worst moment. I want him to pay for it." Arthur put on his glasses and reviewed each document meticulously. Bank statements with dozens of lavish expenses, round-trip plane tickets to Chicago, five-star hotel, invoices, receipts for Rolex watches, and even the text messages with the phrase, "Your husband is mine," along with the video from Sarah's home security camera. He circled repeated transfers with a red pen marked the most expensive invoices, and then looked at me. "This is misappropriation of your wife's assets," he said firmly. "Ryan not only betrayed her emotionally, he also broke the law. We have enough evidence to take him to court." I also told him what happened the night Sarah ended up in the hospital, how I found her passed out on the floor, how Ryan was absent when she and my grandson needed him most. "He was on a yacht proposing to another woman," I said, my voice cracking, biting my lip to hold back tears. Arthur wrote quickly with the speed of someone used to tense cases. He asked for a copy of the security camera video. I took a USB drive from my purse and plugged it into his computer. "This is the moment she falls," I said in a hushed voice, remembering the image of Sarah clutching her stomach, terrified. Arthur watched the video with a furrowed brow, but said nothing, only nodding. Then he called his secretary, a young woman with her hair in a ponytail, and said, "Print 3 copies of all of this, 1 for the court file, 1 for our internal records, and 1 more for Mrs. Johnson." She nodded and took the papers. I watched Arthur organize the documents, feeling a part of the weight on my chest lighten. "Elena," he said, looking me straight in the eye, "this case is strong enough to go to trial. I'm going to request a restraining order right from the start so Ryan can't get near Sarah or the baby. He won't have any way to defend himself." I nodded, feeling like I had finally found a true ally. "Thank you, Arthur," I replied in a low but sincere voice. "All I want is to protect my daughter." He handed me a legal power of attorney document explaining that it would allow him to represent me and Sarah. I signed it, my hand trembling, the signature a bit crooked, but I felt a strange certainty. For the first time in days, I felt like I was doing something, not just waiting helplessly in a hospital hallway. Arthur stood up and gave me a pat on the shoulder. "You are very strong, Elena," he said. "I will do everything in my power to see that Sarah gets justice." I gave him a faint smile, but inside I knew this battle wouldn't be easy. Just as I left the office, my phone vibrated. It was a call from the hospital. I answered, my heart pounding. Dr. Morales' voice came through on the other end, soft but full of hope. "Mrs. Johnson, Sarah has shown signs of waking up." Her hand moved. I stood there, paralyzed, tears streaming down my face. My girl is waking up," I asked, my voice trembling. "Not completely yet," he replied, "but it's a very good sign. Come right away." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, and hung up. I clutched the folder of documents tightly, feeling like I had just received a new surge of strength. Sarah was fighting, and I had to fight too. I took a taxi back to the hospital, my heart on fire. On the way, my phone vibrated again and again. Ryan's name flashed on the screen, one call after another. I looked at that glowing light with his name on it like a reminder of everything he had done. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear his voice or give him a chance to justify himself. Every call was like another stab, but it also confirmed that I was on the right path. He had lost control, and I wasn't going to let him get it back. I ran down the hospital hallway, my heart pounding like it was going to burst out of my chest. Dr. Morales's words echoed in my head. Sarah had shown signs of waking up. After so many days of waiting, that tiny spark of hope was burning inside me, but I was still afraid. Afraid of what I would find when I saw my daughter. A young nurse with her hair in a ponytail stopped me at the door to the ICU. "Mrs. Johnson," she said quietly, her eyes full of concern. Sarah opened her eyes, but she's emotionally very fragile. "Please stay calm when you go in." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and pushed the door open. The intensive care unit was cold, filled with the smell of disinfectant. Sarah was there, her eyes open, but her gaze was lost, as if she were trapped in a nightmare. Her face was pale. Her lips chapped strands of hair stuck to her forehead. When she saw me, she burst into tears, a weak but heartbreaking sob. "Mom," she whispered, her voice broken, unable to say more. I dragged a chair to her side and took her icy hand, feeling my own heart shrink. "I'm here, Sarah," I murmured softly. "You're safe now, honey." But I knew she was far from okay. Dr. Morales approached the bed, his expression serious. "Just for a brief moment, Mrs. Johnson," he warned in a grave tone. "Try not to upset her." I nodded, though inside I was a wreck. I wanted to hug her to promise her that everything was going to be all right. But how could I say that when Ryan had shattered her heart? Sarah looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and murmured, "Mom, and Leo, where's Leo?" Her words pierced my chest like a knife. Before I could answer, a nurse came in carrying Leo in a small bassinet and placed him next to the bed. He was so tiny with his eyes closed and tubes surrounding him. But as soon as she saw him, Sarah started to panic. She shook her head violently, screaming, "Get him away! I don't want to see him! I want to see Ryan Call! Ryan right now!" Her scream tore through the room, leaving me frozen. Leo started to cry, a high-pitched, fragile wail that filled the silence. The nurse quickly took him out, but the sound stayed behind, lodged in my chest, like an accusation. Sarah thrashed in the bed, pulling at the tubes, while the heart monitor beeped erratically. Dr. Morales gave a signal, and the nurse administered a mild sedative. I held my daughter by the shoulders, my voice broken. "Sarah, calm down, please. Ryan, he's not here. He abandoned you." Sarah just kept shaking her head, tears streaming down her face as she continued to call his name. "Ryan, Ryan." Every time she said his name, it was like a knife in my chest, a stab that made me feel like I had failed. I wanted to tell her the truth about the yacht, about the woman in the red bikini, but seeing her so weak, I just couldn't. The medication began to take effect. Sarah's body slowly relaxed, and she sagged against the pillows, her breathing ragged. She closed her eyes, but tears continued to slip down her cheeks. I stayed there holding her hand, listening to the constant beeping of the machines, my heart as heavy as a stone. Dr. Morales took me into the hallway, his voice low but firm. "Her psychological state is very delicate, Mrs. Johnson. She's going to need long-term emotional support, possibly therapy. This shock isn't just from the premature birth, but also from whatever happened before." I nodded, though my head was spinning. I knew that the message, "Your husband is mine," had sent my daughter into a panic. But how could I tell her that the man she loved had betrayed her? How could I let her face that truth when she didn't even have the strength to sit up? I went out into the hall and collapsed into one of those all-too-familiar plastic chairs. My cell phone vibrated. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. I looked at it, and rage ignited inside me like a fire. He had left a voicemail, his tone harsh. "If you don't open the account again, you're going to regret it. I'm not playing Elena." I didn't listen to the whole thing. I saved it and put the phone back in my purse. His threats didn't scare me. They only strengthened my resolve. Did he really think he could intimidate me? Did he think I would let him continue to destroy my daughter? Never. I looked back towards the recovery room where Sarah was sinking into her pain. I remembered when she was a little girl running after me in the yard, laughing, calling me Mommy in her clear little voice. I had promised to protect her, to give her a better life than I had. But seeing her there crying out for a man who didn't deserve her made me feel defeated. My own tears fell. I didn't wipe them away. I let them run, a reminder that I was still fighting. I stood up. I took a deep breath, searching for calm. My mind was clear. I would not let Ryan ruin my daughter's life any more than he already had. He had already stolen too much, her happiness, her money, and the peace she deserved. At dawn, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple black suit I had worn for the most important moments of my life. Today, it wasn't just clothing. It was armor for the battle ahead for my daughter. I took the brown folder, heavy with the evidence I had gathered day after day, and left the house with my lawyer, Arthur. The sky over the city was gray, covered with clouds, as if awaiting a verdict. In the taxi, clutching the folder, my nervousness was mixed with determination. Today, Ryan would have to face the truth. When we arrived at the courthouse, the hallway was already crowded. Reporters with their cameras, curious onlookers murmuring, and some of Sarah's friends, young women she had worked with, had come to support her. One of them, Anna, ran to take my hand. "Mrs. Johnson, we believe in you," she said, her eyes red. I smiled faintly, moved by her kindness, but inside I had only one thought. I had to do this for Sarah and for my grandson. Then I saw Ryan. He walked in wearing a dark blue suit, shiny shoes, and his hair perfectly styled. He was accompanied by a lawyer, a middle-aged man with a cold expression. Ryan looked at me and gave a smug, arrogant smirk. As he passed me, he leaned in and whispered, "You're going to lose Elena. I'm still the baby's legal father." His words were like a stab, but I didn't respond. I just gripped the folder of documents tighter and looked him straight in the eye. He had no idea that I was ready, that I was no longer the weak, crying mother sitting in a hospital hallway. The trial began. The judge, an older woman with a stern face, banged her gavel, calling for order. The courtroom fell completely silent. The only sounds were the rustling of papers and a few whispers from the back. Arthur stood up. His voice was clear and firm. "Your Honor, we are here today to demand justice for Mrs. Sarah Johnson, a mother who is currently fighting for her recovery in a hospital after a shock that led to a premature birth. Meanwhile, her husband, Mr. Ryan Herrera, has misappropriated her assets and betrayed her in the most shameless way." Arthur began to present the evidence. He placed the documents on the table, bank statements showing dozens of lavish expenses from Sarah's account, first-class plane tickets, 5-star hotel bills from Chicago, and receipts for a $20,000 Rolex watch. He displayed on a screen the anonymous message sent to Sarah. "Your husband is mine." It was accompanied by a photo of Ryan embracing his lover on a yacht. The entire courtroom murmured. Some people shook their heads in disgust. Then Arthur played the video from the security camera in Sarah's house, showing the moment she in desperation stumbled and fell her hand on her belly. I sat there watching that scene, tears welling up, but I bit my lip to keep from breaking down. Finally, Arthur showed the live stream of the marriage proposal on the yacht. Ryan on his knees giving a ring to the woman in the red bikini amid cheers and fireworks. He was laughing proudly, as if nothing was wrong, while at that very moment, Sarah was lying in the emergency room, fighting for her life. The entire courtroom erupted in angry murmurs. A woman behind me muttered, "Disgraceful." I looked at Ryan and saw his arrogant smile fade. His face turned pale. Ryan's lawyer stood up to object. "These are common expenses between spouses," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Johnson had pre-existing psychological issues, and there is no direct proof that my client's actions caused her situation." I clenched my fists, wanting to scream that he was lying, but Arthur signaled for me to remain calm. He called Dr. Morales to the stand. The doctor walked in still in his white coat. He spoke calmly but firmly. "Mrs. Johnson was admitted with severe hemorrhaging from a premature rupture of membranes. If she had received proper care and had not suffered such an emotional shock, she would not be in such a critical condition." The judge looked at Arthur, nodding for him to continue. Then she turned to me and said, "Mrs. Johnson, would you like to say something?" I stood up, my legs trembling, but my voice was steady. "Your Honor, while my daughter and my grandson were fighting for their lives, Ryan was proposing to another woman. He took my daughter's money and abandoned her when she needed him most. I'm not asking for much. I'm only asking for justice for my daughter and my grandson. The courtroom was silent. The only sound was my own breathing echoing in my ears. I sat down, feeling as if a great weight had been lifted. The judge banged her gavel and declared the sentence. Custody is granted to Mrs. Sarah Johnson. Mr. Ryan Herrera is prohibited from approaching Sarah and her son. All assets in Mrs. Johnson's name are protected. Mr. Herrera no longer has any control over them. I heard the words, but could hardly believe them. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of relief. I had done it. I had protected my daughter. Ryan jumped to his feet shouting, "You'll regret this!" But the guards were already holding him and escorting him from the courtroom. At that moment, his lover Jessica stood up from the back rows. She was wearing a bright red dress, her expression cold. "I can't be with a ruined man," she said, her tone as sharp as a knife, and turned to leave. Ryan collapsed into his chair, his face completely broken, as if his entire world had just crumbled. The reporters swarmed him, cameras flashing relentlessly. I knew that the video of the marriage proposal, which once made him look like a winner, would soon be proof of his shame spreading across every social media platform. I walked out of the courtroom, clutching the portfolio. Anna and Sarah's friends ran to me, hugging me. "You did it, Mrs. Johnson," Anna said with tears in her eyes. I nodded, smiling. I knew I had to get back to the hospital to tell my daughter that it was over, that she no longer had to live in fear. On the way, I looked out the window and saw that the sky had cleared, as if the storm had finally passed. A few months after the trial, I was in a small room at the community center, reviewing the final documents to create the New Light Foundation. Every signature, every stamp was a step towards turning my pain and Sarah's into hope for others. I had spent weeks, months going from office to office, meeting women who had lived through the same thing as my daughter, abandoned while pregnant, betrayed, and hurt. Each story pained me, but it also gave me the strength to continue. I wanted them to know they weren't alone, that there was someone willing to fight for them, just as I had fought for Sarah. On the day of the foundation's launch, I stood in front of a small hall, my heart pounding, just as it had that first day in court. On the table were several pots of red and purple bougainvillea, a reminder of life blooming in the midst of darkness. Behind me, a large banner read, "No one is left alone." Sarah was by my side, still a bit pale, but her eyes were brighter without the emptiness they held during those hospital days. She wore a light blue dress, her hair pulled back, and in her hands she held a stack of papers with her own story ready to share it. The room slowly filled up. Young women, some with babies in their arms, others alone, sat down quietly. There were also some older women with warm smiles nodding at us. I began, my voice trembling. "I'm Elena, Sarah's mom. We're here because we once lost everything, but we managed to get back up. The New Light Foundation was created so that no one has to walk through the darkness alone." I briefly told my story, those crazy days between the hospital and the courthouse, how I fought to protect my daughter. With every word, I felt myself letting go of a little more of the weight, but also igniting a spark of light in those who were listening. Then it was Sarah's turn. She went up, her hands shaking as she held the paper. "I thought I would never get over it," she began, her voice low but firm. "I lost the person I loved. I lost my trust. And I almost lost my son, too." She paused, took a deep breath, tears glistening in her eyes. "When I was in the hospital, all I wanted was to die. But my mom..." Sarah looked at me, her voice breaking. "My mom didn't abandon me. She fought for me. And now I want to fight for others." The room was silent. You could only hear the soft sobs of a few people. A young woman holding a sleeping baby wiped her tears silently, looking at Sarah with compassion. I was holding Leo in my arms. The boy was stronger now, his bright eyes looking all around. He babbled a few words, making some in the room chuckle. I looked at Sarah's son and felt a warmth in my chest. This child was the reason I never gave up, and now he was the symbol of our survival. After the ceremony, several women came up to shake Sarah's hand. A girl, maybe just over 20, told her in a low voice, "Your story gives me hope. My husband also left me when I was pregnant. I didn't think I could go on." Sarah hugged her, and again tears flowed, but this time they were tears of empathy and connection. The local media came to cover the story. Some reporters jotted down notes quickly, others took pictures of me and Sarah in front of the banner. An older man who introduced himself as a benefactor came to shake my hand. "I want to support your foundation," he said with a sincere voice. "What you and your daughter are doing is very important." I nodded and thanked him, though in my mind I was only thinking of Sarah. For the first time after so many months of darkness, I saw her truly smile, the smile I thought was lost forever. In the afternoon, we returned to the little house by the water that I had rented for Sarah after she left the hospital. We sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the water a fiery orange. The waves lapped the shore with a gentle rhythm, like a lullaby. Sarah was holding Leo, and the boy wiggled laughing when she kissed his forehead. I sat next to her, put a hand on her shoulder, and felt the warmth of her body. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. I thought I would never get over it, but today, speaking in front of everyone, I felt like I can start over. I looked at her, tears welling up in my eyes, but I smiled. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah," I replied, "and I'll always be here whenever you need me." Leo babbled, "Grandma," and reached out his little hand to touch my face. I let out a laugh as tears streamed down my cheeks, but they were tears of happiness. I hugged him, feeling his tiny breath, and thought about everything we had been through. The desperate days in the hospital, the tense hours in the courtroom, the nights I cried alone, wondering if I had done the right thing. "We survived the storm," I whispered, looking at the glowing horizon. "Now a new dawn begins." Sarah rested her head on my shoulder in silence, but I could feel the peace in her. We stayed there 3 generations looking forward. The water continued to lap the shore, and I knew that although the road ahead would still be long, we would never walk it alone again. The story we've told is fictional, but it's based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm truly curious. If it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. I firmly believe that courage leads to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'm leaving you 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I promise they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.